Right, I'll hand you over to Andrew now. He's going to talk about his family experiences.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Trevor. For me, this is a very personal experience we're going to talk about, and I guess that what I'm talking about will reflect for many people in this room today and for most of the people involved in Headway. If I take you to the next slide. If I talk about my family, first of all, because I need to set the scene in terms of the situation we found ourselves, which would probably be quite typical of a lot of people in this room today. We were an ordinary family, Jill and myself. Jill sits in the front there, going about life in an ordinary way, mortgaged to the hilt like young couples tend to be these days, and with a son of, at the time, 9, and a daughter of, at the time, 7. And life was just going ahead as normal families do, and then one day it changed. 21 years ago, virtually to the day, the Green family became a brain-injured family because our son was involved in a road traffic accident where he was knocked off well, actually he wasn't knocked off a bike, if I was to be entirely honest. He put himself in a position where he ran across a give way sign on a bike in front of a vehicle. So the poor driver suffered a huge trauma as well, but it's actually not his fault. What had happened there is that Christopher had gone, he was 9 years old, he'd gone with friends to watch a cricket match. You know, life goes on as normal. Gone to watch a cricket match. We wouldn't buy him a bike. Now, that's quite an interesting fact, and you often wonder, or we often wonder, had we brought him a bike, had he done the road safety or cycling proficiency at the time, had as part of buying that bike been part of the deal been buying a helmet, would things have been different? You can't help but wonder those things. I think everybody does. What if? What if we had been half an hour later? What if we'd been there a bit earlier? All those sort of things go on. But he'd been to watch a cricket game. He'd gone with friends back to their house. And this was a fairly well-off family compared to us. And they had 2 children, 2 boys, and 4 bikes. So off they go for a bike ride. And it's that bike ride that Christopher didn't come back as the Christopher that left. First thing we knew, I'd actually walked in the door and said, Jill, you know, well, where's Chris? Because he was always waiting for me at the gate when I got home. We're good friends, always waiting for me at the gate, and he wasn't there. And Jill said, oh, he's gone to play cricket, so that's fine. And then the phone rings, could you come? There's been an accident, and there he is, lying unconscious in the road. And that's when, for us, the trauma started. Because we live on an island that's quite remote, and Christopher wasn't by then expected to live the night, they decided they wouldn't fly him to Southampton Neurological Unit. So that's when I went into full action. Because I worked for health, I had the chief administrator out, the head consultant, and everybody else. And then we hit another problem. They had a plane, but no pilot. The pilots were all out of the licensed hours they were allowed to fly. And I'd remembered, because we hadn't lived where we were very long, I remembered that one of our neighbours was a pilot and had actually flown for the company. And I thought he still flew for the company that owned the plane. And I phoned him up and said, in the situation, could you come and help us? He said, well, actually, I don't work for the company anymore, but if the company are happy for me to fly you to Southampton, I will. And he did. But then came another trauma because they said, well, neither Jill or myself are allowed on the plane. I got on that plane. That was one of my mistakes, actually, because Jill should have got on as well, and she spent the night waiting for us till she could get a scheduled flight the next day. And I arrived in Southampton with Christopher, with an old jacket that we grabbed quickly, nothing else, no money, nothing. And arrived in Southampton. Actually, when I put my hand in my pocket, I pulled out a pile of fishing hooks. Not a lot of use in the neurological unit. And that's things that we've tried to change at Headway, having sort of emergency packs and so on, Headway Jersey. Then we returned 6 weeks later to Jersey. Christopher hadn't been unconscious for over 5 weeks. I say that, unconscious. I actually realise now he wasn't unconscious, he was sedated, but we didn't understand that at the time. And I'm sure some of you have been in that position, that actually, eventually he came round. When he came round, he was doubly incontinent. He couldn't walk, he couldn't talk. And perhaps it's not the thing to say in an assembly like this, but actually I wondered if I'd done the right thing. It's very difficult. He made a very good and quick physical recovery. He looked great. If you saw him walking down the street today, you actually wouldn't think there was a problem. However, if you spoke to him after a few minutes, you might think there's some problem here. So the doctors are all patting themselves on the back. Haven't we done well? Let's send him home. Because for us, our journey was just beginning as a family. For them, they all thought that they had done their job. If I told you that in 18 years, it was 21 years since the accident, but in 18 years, we never saw a social worker. Nobody ever came round to see if they could help. I'm sure these stories are familiar, because we were coping so well. So it was very much home alone. We were going through the same problems as many of you here in terms of aggressive behaviour, inappropriate comments, and so on. But it's not all bad. I mean, I can think of some funny points, and I will talk about the recovery in a minute. But there are some funny things when you repeat them, and I'm happy, and Chris is happy that I shared them with you. Having said that, they are funny, but they could actually have got him into a lot of trouble if they were said in the wrong place. And, the inappropriate behaviour, things like he said to my secretary when he was waiting for me one day, because he used to come and sit in my office whilst I was still working, if I was working late. By now he's about 13, talking nice and clearly, not always making comments that were appropriate or in context, but talking nice and clearly. And he said to my secretary, do you know, you're wasted working for my father. Oh, really, she says, yes. He said, yes, with tits like you've got, you should be on page 3 of The Sun. But and she knew the situation, so no problem at all. However, if you can imagine him saying that to a young lady in the bar in the hearing of her boyfriend, the situation could have been entirely different, and that's why one needs to be careful. Jill will tell you of a time when she wished the floor at B&Q would open up because she met the wife of my boss, who had been extremely supportive. I mean, he paid me the whole time I was in Southampton and actually came over to see us as well. He'd be extremely supportive, but Jill met my boss's wife. His name was Peter Lambert, and Jill says to Christopher, say hello to Mrs. Lambert, and he looks at her and he says, Lambert, Lambert, I know that name. My dad works with a Lambert, said he's a right pain in the arse.